All right, Robby, what's on your radar today?
So earlier this week, former White House press secretary turned cable news host Jen Psaki interviewed Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, on her MSNBC show. Now, given the recent death of Russian dissident and opposition leader Alexei Navalny, likely on the orders of President Vladimir Putin, the conversation quickly turned to foreign policy. Psaki referenced Donald Trump's comments on the matter, noting that the former president had likened Navalny's political persecution and probable murder to his own treatment by Democratic prosecutors in his various trials. Trump also declined to specifically criticize or blame Putin for Navalny's death, instead releasing a frankly bizarre statement about the, quote, open borders, rigged elections, and grossly unfair courtroom decisions that are destroying America. Emphasis Trump's. When asked what she made of these comments, Pelosi openly speculated that Trump was not merely soft on Putin, but compromised vis-a-vis some financial arrangement, blackmail, or otherwise. Quote, "You wonder what does Putin have on Donald Trump?" asked Pelosi. A few minutes later, Pelosi again suggested that Putin had dirt on Trump, and this was the reason for Trump's relatively cordial relationship with the Russian dictators. Then she criticized Trump's views on NATO, referring to Trump as what's-his-name and then nameless. Psaki chimed in with "he who must not be named," so that's an unintentional Lord of the Rings reference and an intentional Harry Potter reference, if you're keeping count, as I am. Now, when Psaki asked Pelosi explicitly, "What do you think Putin has on him?" the former House Speaker responded that she thought it was, quote, "probably financial." Now, is it fair to criticize Trump for failing to forthrightly condemn the apparent assassination of Putin's chief rival? Of course, but it's easy to do so without falling prey to what is, at this point, a conspiracy theory. For the course of the many years that journalists, political operatives, special investigators doggedly pursued this matter, they turned up no evidence whatsoever that there are hidden motivations explaining Trump's seeming affection for Putin. Yet Democratic pundits and congressional leaders continue to portray a rhetorical and political disagreement. They're more anti-Russia, Trump is less anti-Russia, as evidence that Trump is a Manchurian candidate. These claims go all the way back to the 2016 election, in which Trump's surprise victory was attributed to Russian influence. Now, years later, the idea that Russia was the decisive factor, per the New Yorker's Jane Mayer, has been repeatedly debunked. But the notion that Trump's purported appeasement of Putin is a campaign kickback still has palpable sway over the Democratic Party and progressive media. As my colleague at Reason, Jesse Walker, put it, quote, "While Trump can't get over 2020, the leading Democrats are stuck in an endless loop of 2016. Now, after Trump won the presidency in 2016, Russian attempts to promote him on social media took center stage as the de facto explanation for Hillary Clinton's loss. The mainstream media reported breathlessly on the Internet Research Agency, a Kremlin-backed troll farm, that created fake accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and elsewhere. It is absolutely true that Russia undertook this effort, which reached millions of Americans, according to the Washington Post. It is also true that the IRA purchased about $100,000 worth of political ads on Facebook. What's not true is that this effort was either comprehensive, persuasive, or decisive. The content was seen by just a fraction of overall social media users. On Twitter, roughly 80% of misleading election-related content was glimpsed by just 0.1% of users and wasn't specifically directed at swing voters in the states that Clinton ended up losing. Moreover, as I explained in my book, Tech Panic, Why We Shouldn't Fear Facebook and the Future, Russia's influence efforts were marginal compared to the efforts undertaken by the actual Trump and Clinton campaigns. The IRA spent $100,000 on ads. The campaign spent $80 million. Each time a Facebook user stumbled across some content designed to persuade him to vote for Trump, it was overwhelmingly likely that the originator of said content was a real, sincere Trump fan, not a Russian troll. And in any case, the kinds of voters that swung the election to Trump, older working-class white voters in Michigan and Pennsylvania, not exactly the most online demographic. On the contrary, they disproportionately received their news from traditional technologies like talk radio and television. Perhaps that's why so many in the mainstream media fell in love with the idea that Russian social media malfeasance was the real culprit behind Trump's win. It helped them to deflect from the fact that their own obsessive coverage of his every word was worth $2 billion in free media for the Trump campaign. So when Pelosi continues to say that Trump's behavior is best explained by some secret Russian connection, she is clinging to a theory that doesn't hold much water. It's always possible, of course, that subsequent reporting will reveal that Putin is in fact either blackmailing Trump or paying him off or something of that nature. But for the time being, the sort of speculation both Pelosi and Psaki are engaging in is wildly speculative and totally contrary to Bob Mueller's report. Note, however, that no mainstream fact-checking organization or misinformation watchdog group is springing into action to correct their claims. Liberal news outlets reported on that interview. The Huffington Post actually cheered Pelosi for putting Trump on blast without calling them into question whatsoever. It's very telling what gets counted as misinformation these days and what doesn't. Pelosi was, until very recently, the third most powerful Democrat in Washington, D.C. Yet her brand of conspiracy theorizing, because that's what it is, received very little pushback. Psaki certainly didn't do anything to push back whatsoever. So it was a really interesting interview where repeatedly she says they have something on. Like, you can just breathlessly make this accusation and face no pushback whatsoever, even though they've investigated it for like 8 years now. And you don't need any special reason to explain why Trump says these things. He has some admiration for Putin. I think he would like to be able to silence people coming after him the way Putin does. And then Republicans more generally have a different attitude about the Russia-Ukraine conflict than President Biden and some Democrats. It actually is a policy dispute. You can disagree with them. You can say that's wrong. But they have to imagine that it's something sinister, because that's the only way Trump would ever. Putin must have sway over him, must have bought him, or Trump is paying him back for having made him president. A claim that Hillary Clinton and so many other Democrats repeated ad nauseum, even though it's been debunked over and over again.
I was listening to Pod Save America this morning where Mehdi Hasan was being interviewed, and they have an interlude where they talk about Trump and Putin and an answer that he gave on the Lower Ingram town hall. And, Mehdi's pretty careful and, doesn't tend toward those same kind of exaggerations like a lot of the kind of Russiagate liberal press, and even described himself as like not a big Russiagator in the context of that interview. But he said he did always find it to be curious that Donald Trump would even make a criticism of Kim Jong-un, but never made a criticism of Putin. And like, what is that about? And I'm like, even he couldn't resist making a statement like that. It's like, to me, the evidence is, are you saying that also that but for the one criticism that he made of Kim Jong-un's appearance or whatever it was, right, you would also argue that he's in league with North Korea? I mean, at what point do you start to see that your own rationalization of what the evidence is that suggests that that Trump has an actual relationship with Vladimir Putin would extend so broadly as to be absurd? I mean, what are you interrogating the evidence that you're bringing forward here? Why would you even diminish yourself by making an argument like that? You are doing a Russiagate. You are fully in the swings and the throes of Russiagate-ness if you are going to raise using that as evidence. He's never insulted this other world leader as a basis for thinking that there's some kind of scheme afoot.
It's just a totally permissible kind of conspiracy that flourishes, even though, and there are aspects of it. Yes, Russia did try to interfere. They did have bots on social media. The effect of that has been wildly exaggerated.
That's not the claim.
Right,
and the reverse could be said true of Joe Biden. It seems like his family members tried to trade on his name. That's not the same thing as there being an actual pay-to-play scheme that Joe Biden participated in and was remunerated by.
Exactly. But you can speculate wildly about this on a friendly, progressive cable news and receive no pushback during the interview. And then I was looking, there's no one's leaping into action to say, actually, this is a really unproven accusation that has been looked at over and over again by journalists and by a special investigator, and they didn't come up. They really wanted to find something. They didn't find anything. But no one does that work in this case.
Yeah. All right. Well, stick around. We've got more Rising for you coming up next.